Too late. Just good afternoon to everyone. Just let everybody know we're actually live now onto YouTube. So just be aware of that. Good afternoon and welcome to another episode of People Talk. My name is Paul Lawrence, and it's another Sunday afternoon. Normally when I have the show, the first thing I say is how great a week it's been and how wonderful and all of that. This hasn't been such a week. Not for me personally. For me personally, it's been great. It's been brilliant. But we are a part of a wider community. And I think the best thing I can say is that when your community is suffering, doesn't matter what it is, even if it doesn't affect you directly, it affects you personally. You know, when I decided on this topic a week ago, the original title, and I don't want anyone to think I brought them in on the false pretenses. The original title was about domestic violence. That was the idea of the original topic. And I always knew that was going to be a popular topic anyway. Yeah, there was never any doubt that would be popular, that people would want to talk about that in any event. However, unless you've been living under a hole socially, events over the last week have certainly taken a very different turn. And I sort of felt to myself that I would be doing the community an injustice if I didn't use my platform such that it is to address this from a different angle. And so, you know, late in the week, around Thursday, Friday, I dropped the core title of domestic violence, and I decided to try and see if we could do a show where we focused more on the way we as a community, black, white, doesn't really matter to be honest, but the way we as a community handle issues of sexual abuse in the community. Now, let's be clear. The entire topic is a trigger for a lot of people. Yeah. You know, conversations I've had over the last 72 hours, and if I'm going to be honest, over my lifetime, tell me that sexual abuse is rife. And perhaps one of the first things we need to address is our denial. You know, we in the black community quite specifically will happily point at the average white guy and we will label him a pedophile, and we're happy with that. And, you know, we will cry them down and we will say, you know, this, that, and don't get me wrong, I'm not saying they don't deserve to be cried down. I'm just saying that we don't tend to take a look within. We have this attitude where we don't look within. And it no longer serves us, if it ever did. It's time for us to start to be very honest about the damage that is being done within our families, within our homes, within our extended family, within our communities, by people who far too often we know. You know, one of the saddest things about this topic is that over the years I've been on social media, I've watched us laugh about that uncle that no one leaving the kids with, you know? We've laughed about it. We've joked about it. But we're talking about this from actual experiences. And at the end of those experiences, I will hazard a guess that there are some traumatized young people who may now be adults who are carrying that trauma. And so that joke don't swim no more. If it ever did. And this is the crux of the issue. So if I give you a little bit of background before I start to introduce my guest and we crack on, there was a case in the media of a gentleman. He's gone to court. Court's been decided. He's been found guilty. And that's what sort of brought my interest to this. Because before he was found guilty, one of his victims, and I'm saying victims now, I'm not saying alleged anymore, she was on social media saying, you know what, this guy did this to me. He absolutely did this to me. He did this to many more ladies that I'm aware of. This is his pattern of behavior. And she wasn't looking for sympathy. Let's be crystal clear. What she was asking the community is, why do we stand by these people? And that's what caught my eye with her pleas. Yeah. She was asking, why do we as a community know these men? As, you know, it's not exclusively men, and we're going to talk about that later, but predominantly are men. Why do we stand by them? All of these men have brethren who they break bread with. I know me and my crew, we you know, before lockdown, on a Friday, we'd go out, we'd eat our fish, and we'd chat all sorts of rubbish and foolishness. But I would like to think that if we were aware of one of our crew acting in that way, we would call him out. We would take him aside and within the boundaries of the law, boss him ass. Because it's not acceptable. And this lady was trying to ask, why wasn't this happening? She was asking that same question of, because this guy was relatively high profile. I didn't know him because I'm not into that type of music, but he's relatively high profile. And she wanted to know why the organizations were continuing to support him. You know what? Events got past that. And we got to a point in the week where there was a massive, massive viral video very much on this same topic. And that's what directed me to where I am now. And that's why I'm talking to the four ladies I'm talking to. And I want to say, it's not that I can't get men to talk about this topic, because I can. But you know what? In our community, we lean very hard on a few people, both men and women, by the way. And you won't be surprised that 3 of the people who are on my call today actually have been on my call before. Yeah? One of them was actually on the call before when we did domestic abuse. And I say that to say this. We lean very hard on the few people who are either articulate enough, knowledgeable enough, passionate enough to speak on these topics. And if one thing comes out of this show today, one single thing, is that I want individuals listening to my voice today to find their own voice. And what we're looking to examine today is how you can find your voice in a constructive manner. In a manner that feeds the survivors. You know, years ago I learned you don't call them victims. Yeah? We feed the survivors rather than feeding the abusers. Let me be crystal clear. In the past, I tried to out an abuser. And the net effect of my actions was that he was able to run for cover. So I'm talking from a position of experience in this. He was able to run for cover and pretend that he was somehow the victim. That somehow we were ganging up on him. And he got his story straight. He slurped off. And he's still out there. I don't know if he's still behaving in that way, but he's still out there. So we have to be careful about our actions. And we have to be careful about how our actions impact on the people we claim to be speaking on behalf of. This has been my longest introduction since I've been doing this show in April. And that's because of the level of passion that is in it for me. Yeah. I'm not even going to pretend like my life has been absent from any sort of abuse. I know the household I grew up in. And that's all I'll say. Because I don't want to offend any of my family, my older family, because the perpetrator of that violence is now dead. But I know where I'm coming from with this. And I know how it makes me feel when in a misguided attempt to sort of, do something, the perpetrator goes free as a consequence of that. Or worse yet, the survivors hurt more, and as is often the case. So that's my Paul Lawrence soliloquy for the day. I'm hoping I don't have to talk much more. I've already shared the YouTube link. Please, for those of you who have people who probably not inclined to share with us on Zoom, you can share the YouTube link. It's also up on my Facebook page, www.facebook.com/idleyardie. It's there. I'll be filtering it through as people introduce themselves. So I'm going to start in the order which people joined, even though Nicola cheated and she got her husband, I'm assuming, because she's too young to have a picnic at that age, so it must be her husband. You joined first. Just ask you to unmute and introduce yourself, and just a couple of words of what you bring to this topic.
Hello, good afternoon, panel members and also people that are watching. My name is Nicola Calicamal, even though Mr. Lawrence can talk a good game, he couldn't spell my surname right. But hey, we hold no malice, because he's there laughing and holding headphones. But at the end of the day, come blow me. I can blow you back, brother. That's from being empowered. All right. So anyway, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, people on the panel, people I know, people who've heard my voice before. My name's Nicola, and I speak out a lot. I haven't spoken out for a couple of years because, well, sometimes life can stop you to make you kind of sit back and then be able to actively look to see where your voice is going to be best heard and your words empowering to those. So I come from a perspective of love. I come as a person who loves all community, and that's why I'm here. And it's my late dad's birthday today. So today, Mr. Lawrence has pulled me out of a challenge zone. So if my eyes look like hole in snow, ladies and gentlemen, I'm doing this because it's important. This topic especially is important. So sometimes you have to be big enough to take yourself out of an equation and address the bigger picture. So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, and I absolutely want to thank Nicola. We were communicating in the week about the challenges of her doing the show today. And I know there are other people on the show who also have challenges. So forgive me if for the first half of the show, I tend to focus on those people because I know they may need to go at short notice. So no stranger to Facebook Lives. And I like to consider her my project. I like to consider her my project. And that is someone who I can happily say is the phenomenal Donna Murray-Turner. Donna, unmute yourself and say hi.
Thank you for that introduction. Can you hear me? Is my microphone?
Yeah, we can hear you loud and clear, Don.
Oh, brilliant. Good afternoon, fellow panel members, and good afternoon to everybody else in the Zoom room and also those listening to us. I'm honoured to be here. I am a survivor of sexual abuse, and also as a practitioner and somebody who is a community influencer, this subject is very close and has great resonance within me and also outside of myself. And I think that today for me will be a brave space rather than a safe space, because actually what we're doing is confronting as a community something that for too long has not been addressed. And so many people have suffered because of our silence. We said a lot during BLM that silence was violence. And I think this is one of the times that silence has been violence for us as a community. And I look forward to the discussion, definitely.
Thank you, Donna. The next person I'm going to introduce is someone who I wouldn't say I met recently. We we crossed paths many, many, many years ago at a Jamaica independence dance. And we've rediscovered each other a lot later. And, you know, if I say that we become very good friends, I'd say that's a bit of an understatement. She too has been on my show a number of times. And what she brings, which, you know, I'll allow her to explain who she, but what she brings is the side which we always feel is missing. And this is about, who do we go to when we feel pain? Shireen, you want to unmute yourself and say hi, please?
Hi, my name is Shireen Barrows. I am a counsellor, and I also run an organization called SAB Counselling Service. I work for the NHS as well as a local charity. This topic is very close to my heart also. I have not only clients, a number of clients who encounter this, but I too am a survivor. I would say 1 in 20 children in the UK will experience some sort of child sexual abuse. And my role today is to give you some of the signs and the awareness when you suspect that someone is being sexually abused, and also the repercussions of sexual abuse to when they become adults. And that's what my role is today.
Okay, now the fourth and final guest. Some people are sure that me and this girl have been together for years. Little do they know that we've only met physically 2 or 3 times. But she continues to poke at me on Facebook, sowing the seeds of this conspiracy theory about my love life. But you know what? She's cute, so we can work with it. Yeah, I've been linked to worse. But more importantly than that, and certainly her reason for being here today, is her passion behind this topic. Yep. You know, there are some times when I need people for a topic where I struggle to think of people who I know, A, I can call on, and B, who I know will say yes. Yeah, she's not going to be here for a long time today. So we're going to start with her. Sarah, please unmute yourself and introduce yourself quickly.
Okay, hi everyone, panel members and guests, and thanks for having me back, Paul. I really appreciate it. So just a little bit about myself. I've worked in the sector of domestic and sexual violence now for about 20 years, probably longer than that now. I've delivered training to statutory, voluntary groups and organisations. I've done quite a bit of recent work around victim blaming and consent, going into schools and teaching year 10 and 11s about what consent is, and also looking at the sort of like wider aspects of victim blaming and also trauma, so sexual violence trauma, domestic violence trauma, and how that affects survivors and trauma responses as well, because I think what we see a lot of now, and even over these last couple of days and weeks, we're seeing trauma responses.
Don't stop here, because we're going to stick with you for the time. I said I know you have to leave early, so I thought I'd stick with you. So I want to kind of, before we start talking about solutions and things that people can do, I don't know if you can, but can you shed any light on why there is this enormous wall of secrecy within our community when it comes to stuff like this?
Okay. I just want to say that what happens in our community might feel very isolated to our community, but the nature of sexual and domestic violence, this is how it manifests in communities as a whole. So it's not just isolated to our community. I think in our community, the issues that we have is there's a lot of shame. There's a lot of, we don't take our business out on the road. And there's also that kind of thing. I don't know if anyone can remember the film Dance Hall Queen, yeah? And there's a particular scene, and there's Uncle Larry, right? And the daughter says, "Mama, how could you do that to me?" And she says something along the lines, well, if it wasn't for Larry, we wouldn't eat. Okay. So when we start looking at things kind of like historically, we see that there was a lot of kind of almost colluding with abusers, and it was sometimes seen as a means to an end. You have to learn, you have to this, we don't talk about this, we hide this, we want to protect the abuser, we don't want people knowing, we're scared of what the police will do, we don't want police brutality, it's better we deal with it ourselves, nobody needs to know. There's all these strands and all these reasons why we don't share, but it is not exclusive to our community. All right. And also sometimes people love the abuser, they just want the abuse to stop. That's quite a natural thing. If you're a child and you're being abused by a loved one, a sibling, a father, an uncle, a cousin, yeah, you love that person, you want the abuse to stop. You know, you don't necessarily want them to be taken to prison, you don't want them dead. You want the abuse to stop. And I think this is something that when we're looking at things being victim focused or survivor focused, we need to understand that the needs of a survivor or the needs of a victim are not necessarily kill them and lock them up. The needs of the survivor is love me as a human being, stop abusing me. That can also impact on that.
You know, I can see everybody else sort of nodding away. Nicola, again, I understand the day that you're having today. So thank you so much for joining anyway.
You're very welcome. Very welcome. I totally agreed with what Sarah was saying there. You know, I myself am a survivor, and I think that part of the reason why I became motivated to help the world, my son, he constantly says, "Mum, you're trying to save the world," is because when my when my period of abuse, sexual, mental, emotional, physical, when it really came into its fruition, as a child, I had nobody to turn to, because like what you were saying, Sarah, these people, you know, the person was within the family, and it was like, I'm not going to get believed. And then when I did disclose, I had a bucket of urine thrown over me. I was told I was a home wrecker. I was told various things. Do you know what I mean? Things that since, you know, coming to this ripe old age of 47, I've been able to look at myself as the survivor. I've been able to forgive any kind of I don't know if it's the right word to say, but any kind of misinformed judgments of my behavior as a child, because I realized I was a child. So how could I have been responsible? And I think that that's a lot of the mindset and a lot of the learned behaviors that until you get to survivor mode and you're still in that victim mode, you know, unless you're given the tools or you yourself are able to, you know, dig in and kind of ignite your own fire, yeah, it will then affect you in every aspect of your life, every aspect in your life. So there was a lot what Sarah was saying that I was nodding, you know, with Donna when she was saying that, you know, it's a very brave space. I speak openly, I speak to the abuser, you know what I mean? And, you know, because, you know, I saw me, but no, you understand? And it's about a power shift. And by embracing my survivor mode, I embrace the power till the point is people recognize this person's actually terrified of me.
Donna, my question to you, what Nicola just said is big. And I'm trying to understand how, first of all, it's cut up into two parts. So part number one is this section where somehow built into the society's response is this well, she ripe, she this, she that. How does a young lady, and I'm going to stay with young women right now, we're going to come to the men later on. How does a young lady go from being told that somehow she called this upon herself? She dressed wrong. Look how she tall, look how her breast big, look how she this, look how she that. As if those are justifications for the action. How does she move? How do we trap? I don't know. There's so many questions I have. How do we trap the young ladies in that psyche and then expect them to turn out as powerful as Nicola when they're in their 40s and 50s and speak out suddenly? And, you know, if they don't speak out, it's because it never happened. How do we do that?
I am that child you just described. I was 5'9" at 10. I had breasts, hips, pretty much as I am now is how I was at 10. I think my first uniform for secondary school was a size 16. My nickname was somebody else's mum. So I have been that child, tall, overly developed. I had my periods at 9. And you're right, a lot of that character attributary was part of my definition. How do we stop it, you say? Well, since we cannot stop the physical, children will grow at their own rate according to their DNA, then we have to challenge the mindset. And for me, this is a really good point, you know, Paul, because it does start with the victim blaming. And I know that I've seen that word victim blaming bandied about a lot, but it starts within the home. If the parents of these children, like myself, are already casting a flavor of victim blaming in their homes, if it's everybody else's, it's, you know, the child's fault because they look a certain way, if we're not treating children as children, you know, one of the things I really do want to use my voice to say is we are buying into our own conditioning. We talk often about outside structures that do not see our children and treat them in an unequal way to other communities' children, but we do it ourselves. You know, I remember I have a son who's also taken some of my physical characteristics. And I remember he would be sat there in the barbershop, you know, playing with his cars and whatever. And people would say, then stop it, man. And I would say, he's 6. Oh, but he's so big. These are some of the things, you know, that we start to do. And I've used my son and not a girl, you know, as the prime example, because it's already in our mindset. Allow our children to be children. So the fact that, you know, they might be shapely, who is going to say to the men and the women of our community, they're still a child? They are still a child, not, you know, not a fully formed piece of meat yet. It's a child. Might have an adult's body, but the mind contained within is that of a child. So we, as a community, we as parents, we also have to watch our language. What is the language that we use within our homes to describe our own children? What does it say? Where do we place the value and the blame? Are we already on this, you know, victim blaming in the way that we speak and refer to our children and describe other people's children? Well, then what she expects, she'll wear 2-inch miniskirt. She's begging for it. As women, as mothers, as all of us, men as well, how are we speaking about our young people? The victim blaming, that's why I say we've bought into the conditioning. We have bought into the conditioning that is used against us, and now we use it internally on each other. And that, for me, is the root cause and where it needs to stop. And that's the problem. How do you change a mindset, Paul, that for 500 years has been thought to commodify even itself? That is a problem. Unless we start seeing each other and treating each other as human beings and stop seeing our children as just, you know, external commodities, and we demonstrate that in our language and how we speak about them and refer to them, then the victim blaming will continue.
I'm actually saddened. And the reason why I'm saddened is because I work with parents in one of the charities, well, both of the charities that I'm a part of. And even this weekend, we were having a conversation about the sort of stuff that we allow our children to do because we ourselves are given into peer pressure. And I don't think we kind of get it, that they are not adults. And so you can't give a child, for example, a smartphone and expect an adult response from them, because they're not. They're just not adults. Shireen, mentally, what's the impact that these young people, these young ladies are having by, Dawn in the chat has said, let's be very clear, your age, you can't give consent. You simply don't have the consent. So it doesn't matter if the man says, which they tend to say, oh yes, she said yes. It wasn't rape. It was rape. It's rape no matter how you want to style it. Yeah? Because you as the man have the mental capacity, I'm assuming, to say, I'm not supposed to go here. That's the role you're supposed to play. But when you're working with people, and I don't know if you work with young women as well, or is it just the older women who have gone through trauma, what's coming back from that part of their life?
I think before I tackle that question, one of the things that I've noticed, and one of the questions that keeps reoccurring with these individuals, is why is it that our community tend to protect the perpetrator and isolate the victim? Why is it that, all of a sudden something happens and it is about, okay, he didn't mean it, or forgive him, rather than actually focusing on the victim themselves? Now, there are a number of things that can show up in the person's life: depression, anxiety, eating disorders, self-harm, post-traumatic stress disorder, even suicide itself, because especially if the victim feels blamed, or the victim feels as though there's no way out, those are the feelings they're going to have. It does come with guilt and shame, and they're the ones who feel they've done something wrong. For example, in the Asian culture, it kind of removes the ability for them to get married. They look at them as broken or stained. And in our culture, it's like that person is a Jezebel. As Nicola said, she basically said she's being accused of breaking up somebody's marriage. When a grown person make the decision to have sex with somebody under the age of consent, regardless, it is sexual abuse. It is rape.
Quickly, Shireen, before you go, I want a quick question, because I know Sarah has 10 zillion upon it. We were talking this morning, you and I, about this blind spot that we have. Because someone in the chat has mentioned the fact that it's not just men who are the abusers. Mm-hmm. Talk to us quickly about this blind spot that you were mentioning this morning.
Okay, I will give you, I'm a mother of girls. And for me, I spent my life ensuring that my girls were protected. But the normal thing is, you think, okay, protected against men. And yet there is such a vast amount of women who has reported being sexually abused by another woman. So it is actually massive. The blind spot is, don't just look at one sex. Either sex can be perpetrators. Yeah. So avoid that blind spot by looking there as well. If your child is saying, I don't want to go to this person's house, if your child is saying, I don't like being around that person, listen. Don't just assume that your child is being rude.
When we were talking about the blind spot, I'm going to come to Sarah in a minute, because you also sent me an article about men who have been abused. And I was thinking about the degree of blind spot we have around that.
Yes.
Because we are in so denial about homosexuality as a Black community. So we kind of think that's there. But we sort of, we would big up a young man if he said, Auntie so-and-so, 10 years older than me, did this to me. We give him a round of applause.
Yeah, that is exactly what happened, because sometimes men or boys don't identify that they're being sexually abused because it's a female, because it's older. They feel, okay, it's great. I can say I was sexually active at 12, but it is abuse. It is abuse if you are in a position of power and the person is underage And whether or not you feel the person consents, the blind spot for men is that they feel at times, or they bury it as a sexual experience, but it's abuse. It can be abuse from a male to a man, and equally abuse from a female to a man.
Sarah?
Yeah, I agree with all the points, and I think there are some blind spots when we're looking at female to male abuse and stuff like that. But I think it's rooted in patriarchy. I think it's rooted in the fact that men go off and they sow their wild oats, and women are virginal, and women are the motherers and the nurturers and stuff like that. And I also want to say that there is a tremendous difference of dynamics when we're looking at power and control, and that's not to sweep it under the carpet. I think they're both very important, but we need to approach them with different attitudes and look at the different dynamics that are at play. And I think one of the things that we need to do as a community is look at our ecosystems and look at how individual attitudes, our extended families, the wider community, the media, the roles the institution plays in our lives, why we hold some of the attitudes that we have. There's this whole emphasis in the Black community, especially if you grew up in a predominantly Christian home, that there's this thing called forgiveness, okay? And that once we go to church and we repent, we are to just forgive. Okay. Now, one of the things that I think is very dangerous with that mentality, when we're just calling for people, come to the altar, you confess that you were abused and you're just to forgive, is we're never actually dealing with some of the issues, such as Shireen said, eating disorders, drug addiction, self-harm, PTSD, depression. I was having a conversation this week and I got very angry, and I said, people want to know why Black women today are dysfunctional and crazy and all of these things. And I said, blame your fathers and blame your sons. And I said that not to trash men in any way, shape or form. What I meant is in the wider context of the society that we live in is very, very patriarchal. There is a thing called male privilege. And also the ideas that, a woman, you just take her in it. We see that. We see that when you go to a dance and you're walking through a crowd and a man just grabs your hand and you're just to dance with him and you're just to, you take. You take. I heard a married man say, if my wife doesn't give me sex, I take it. Okay, well, that's rape. We have to start understanding what these things are. And then not only when we start to understand, we also need to be very careful. Like, when you out a perpetrator, you ultimately out the survivor as well. All right. So if someone is abusing children and you out that person as a child molester or as a pedophile, you're also outing all of those survivors. And there has to be some cognizance and some moral responsibility that we refrain from going on social media and talking about trauma. Somebody else's trauma. That's not our story. Somebody else's trauma, especially when they were a child. We also have to remember, if children resulted from this sexual violence, that those children are now finding out that they are products. They came about by rape. There's all that secondary trauma to deal with as well. So we have to be aware that a lot of this is trauma response. It's vicarious trauma response, it's PTSD, and we need to manage this in a really healthy way by providing people with this is where you can get support by trained professionals. Okay, we can all do the Good Samaritan and listen, but really and truly, when it comes to the violation of the body that splits the psyche, that affects the soul, that affects the spirit, you need to let the professionals in to do that, because we can really unwittingly have some and create some damage. And I know I've gone on a rant.
No,
you haven't.
You haven't gone on a rant, because
You haven't.
that question that you did, which is what I was going to go on to everybody with, and I wanted you to talk about it, which you did, was around these social media outings. Yeah, because I started the show earlier by saying I did something similar years ago, and the result was not the result that we had hoped for. The result was that the person bunkered down, got support, and has moved on with his life, while the victims are left in the trail. I'm only going back to Sarah because I know she may have to leave soon.
I just want to say with this that the case which involved, which ended up in the papers, I'm not going to call any names, which ended up in the papers, that was handled very differently. We have to understand with social media, and I'm not in any way protecting perpetrators or anything like that. I think it's in the public interest that we know what's going on. What we don't know, what we don't need to know is intimate details, who the victims are and where it happened and what happened on that day and so on and so forth. I think what's very important when this happens is that we recognize that the survivors, when you out a perpetrator, you out the survivors as well, intentionally or unintentionally. We also have to be aware that there can be active police investigations, and some of what we're saying, etc., could be used in evidence, or we could be undermining cases. I remember working on a case, and what had happened, and I'm being very careful here because I'm respecting confidentiality and I'm not breaking anything. I just want to make that very clear. And the perpetrator had assaulted the woman, and the next day there was a text exchange, and the woman didn't allude to what had happened. It was very, hey, how are you? I'm fine. And that was used, right? That was used in court to say, well, if she had been assaulted, why didn't she say? She responded like this or she responded like that. So we have to be very careful. And we're not here to be, this isn't ghetto court. There are specialist organisations, there are specialist police officers, there's the RASO team and CPS that are trained specifically to do this. And whilst we might not have a lot of faith, we ourselves have no power, okay, in order to take these people down. We can expose them, but in terms of legal justice, we lack that power. So we have to be very, very careful about what it is that we're sharing on social media, and ask ourselves, when I hit that send button and send it to the WhatsApp group, for what purpose am I doing that? Because now we have awareness. How does it change our day-to-day life? What does it do? Now we have to be very careful, okay? We have to be very careful that we don't undermine police investigations.
Nicola.
So I agree with the vast majority of what you were saying. And one of the things, because I've been albeit I've got my glasses on, so I'm seeing some of the comments that are coming at the bottom. And, in regards to that video that went viral, now, it was shared to me too many times, to be fair. It was too many times I received that. And every time I watched it, my heart broke, because you could sense the sister's anger, her passion, her disgust at the whole situation, the fact that historically this has been allowed to go on for years. And I think that the vast majority of people here and also watching would agree that it's the whole closed, the secrecy around it that just makes a person who has been subjected to any type of abuse, it just makes it worse. But on the premise of watching that, I then, I got to find out that the perpetrator has 80, let me say that again, 80 children. How many of those children, how many of those mothers were actively, you understand? You imagine the conversations that they've got to have now. And I cried tears.
And that's the point.
Tears.
That's the point that I think is being missing. And
yeah.
I think that's
how many conversations now have them kids got to be like, hang on a minute, was I conceived in this way? Did this happen to my mum? And the whole dynamic. And this is why I agree that it has to be managed by professionals. Do I think that it was wrong for a person to air their thing on social media? Well, I'll be a living hypocrite if I said I don't agree with that. Because if I've got something to say, that's how I'm making sure everybody hears it. But that's just how I roll. In regards to the whole church thing, if you don't know this, may I tell everybody for free, God runs things, yeah, as far as me concerned. Now, you can't go to some pastor who is only made of flesh and blood and feel that he is going to be equipped to deal with you and your personal circumstances. Only one big person can do that, him called God. And you have to get to a point in your life where you feel that, you know what, I'm that down, the only way I can go is up. Me know that from personal experience. That's why I'm able to walk without fear, to speak without fear and condemnation. And I speak with conviction because I know people around you will fail you, but God ain't. And that's the person who healed me from my historic abuse that, you understand, that kept me in a place. By the time I got to 16, I've made several attempts on my life. Now, people who know me, yeah, they'll be like, huh? She's just got a bag of, it's like people think I go to bed plugged into Duracell battery. When I phone people, people start laughing. Dion's laughing because, you know, yeah? People start laughing because they're like, Nick, because I've got all of this personality. But this has come as a result of wearing two faces. One face when something triggers me and I go within, yeah? And I can't move. And the other face is when I put on, when you guys see me, this is because it's my dad's birthday, you understand? But when you see me and I've got the proper face and makeup on, they're the days I'm having a hard day. So I put on my mask because it's not for you guys, for, you understand? Because I'm one of those people, you don't know what you're going through. You don't know what seed you plant with what you say. You could actually turn another person's day around. You understand? And you don't even know what that person's going through, gonna be, you understand? You know, you don't know what's ahead of them. But it's about within yourself. And as I said, Sarah, I agree with everything you say, you know? But you see the thing about God? Ain't nobody can diss that God thing, not when I'm here, because soon and very soon, he's the only person, no matter where you're from, what color you are, how you look, how thick set, how skinny set you are, in a time like this, soon that's the only name you're going to call on. So I'm going to let somebody else talk because
until he turns up.
Donna's here.
What we're going to do? I'm going to go, Donna, you need to unmute, then I'm going to go to Shireen. Donna, what do? We know he's coming. Okay, Sarah, bye-bye, and thanks for your time. Yeah, your contributions were well played out. Donna, what we going to do? Because we need a community shift. We need a shift in how we think. We need our men. Someone in the chat said our men need to be looking in the mirror. Well, I say we need to stop looking in the mirror now and start talk. Because some of us is our brethren them, and we know. Yeah? We know. You know, a lot of people, you know, we're not going to call names, but let's be realistic. It didn't take me 2 telephone calls to find out whether something I heard last week was true or false. It didn't take me 2 telephone calls. I wasn't even here in those times. I was abroad. I lived abroad at the time. So I had no reference point. Within 2 telephone calls, I had confirmation of the truth or not of a given situation. So people know. What do we do?
I'm going to answer in 2 ways. The first, I listened to what Sarah said, and she's right. The professional side of me says she is right in terms of safeguarding for victims, not for victims, for survivors, in terms of libel for the perpetrator. There is that it's necessary to be guarded about what is said and perhaps not using social media. But like Nicola said, the real Donna.
And you notice that she started going to Patois. She got to Patois for this part.
You have to call them out. You have to bond them and like them. Because you see, for me, a lot of the frustration that we feel, yeah, and that was borne out by the videos that we've seen in the last couple of days, is a direct result of the frustration of not being believed, of being, you know, in belief systems, I'll say that much, that collude to not call out these people, to, you know, in marriages where wives are, for whatever reason, do not speak out against what they know their husbands and brothers and the whole community is complicit, because people are not speaking out on the behalf of children, boys, girls, young women. And so for me, you know, 3 weeks ago, Paul, and there'll be some people on the call as well, I called out my brothers after the stabbing of the 2 girls in Thornton Heath and the abduction.
Keep going.
And the abduction of the young girl in Mitcham. I called out my brothers. I put a call out. I feel no way. I said, where are you? The community needs protecting. Where are you? And they answered, and they came and they said what they had to say. I think we need the creation. Listen, let's be honest. Let's just talk the truth for a hot minute, like family. We don't have the money. So whoever's got £150 an hour to go counsellor, raise your hand, because me no have it. So in lieu of that, we have to create our own brave spaces where we allow some of this frustration, some of how we feel. Some people feel, you know, out of fear. They feel that they can't say anything. We have to discuss that fear. We have to call out the church leaders, the community leaders who know that these things exist and have done nothing to change the narrative. That is what I strongly think we need to do. And on the flip side of that, we have to find out ways of supporting the survivors for more of them to come forward. If they feel that every time, and this is where Sarah's point bears fruit, if they feel that every time they may disclose, it depends like Paul, you know, because somebody else is burnt by it, so they're going to go on there, people are not going to come forward. And I think that those of us who are community leaders that have a smidgen of training in safeguarding, this is the time to kind of put 1-2 workshop and train other people. Though, and there's a, you know, Anne-Marie has said, I've got over how many years in social work. This is, people like her are the people we should be turning to and saying, sis, come at me 1-2 workshop where we empower other women, other men around the sensitivities so that we effectively self-heal, or we at least begin to self-heal. We don't have the money, but the perpetrators will be allowed if the survivors are silenced. I personally stand in solidarity with the lady who issued those 2 videos, because you know what? For as much as people want to talk about, oh, she's going to put us, one of us, if we stand for nothing at this rate, the Black community ain't standing for much. If we don't stand for one thing, let this be, at least be this. What legacy are we leaving behind us? What are we saying to our young people? But we expect there to be no knife crime. We expect they're not the evidence, some of the things that they're feeling. We often talk as adults about young people. Look at us. We're quite prepared to sit down. Men know that their brethren are battering their women and molesting other people's gal picnic, and they don't want to talk about it. Because you can defend your women. Yeah. So it's all right. You can defend yours. But what about the families out there that don't have that type of covering? What happens to them? Oh, they should just suffer. This is what I'm saying. This is why my comments always centered around humanity. We have descended so very far from those people who came in with cardboard luggage and thin cardigans, who came off of Windrush. We have descended so very far to the fact that we don't even see each other as human, because we don't see the need to say, yes, I am my brother's keeper and I'm my sister's keeper. And instead are quite prepared to see those who need that amount of leverage and need that amount of support be trampled into the dirt with their emotions, with their psychosis, with their eating disorders. We're quite prepared to see that happen and sit back and laugh, rather than call out the very perpetrators for fear of what? One man, one woman. If we see it, we should call it out, because our children and our community are dependent on us calling out what we see. This is what happens when you constantly rebut being policed externally. It starts to seep in internally. And this is what years of not policing ourselves internally has resulted in. Now it's just chaos and every man's out for himself. And there is community, Paul, and I will end on this, but there is lack of humanity within that community. And that's what we need to be talking about. Where is our humanity gone? In 70 years, where has our humanity gone? We don't even recognize one another and one another's pain. And I'll end there.
Shireen, I have to ask you, Shireen.
Yeah.
because we're almost upon the hour. I'm not saying we're finished. For everybody who's in the chat, we're going to shut it down more or less at 3, but we'll still be here as we always are. Shireen, where do we go? Yeah, because
Well,
a lot of people, someone made a comment about £150 an hour. Treatment being a bit, I don't know how much you charge.
no, not £150 an hour, that's for sure.
But the question I want to ask you, beyond what you charge, is this. And this is because I know these questions are asked. How do the services, I did a spiral there of a number of services that people can contact. How have the services changed to understand our trauma? Have they changed? Are they just the same? What's happening? Because we can't ask people to access these services if they're going to walk into the services and feel like, nah, this is not for me. This doesn't work for me. Have stuff changed?
Well, what I can say is, obviously, if you approach places like the NSPCC, which is Society for Protection of Children, they will give general advice.
They're not for Black people.
Yeah, they will give general advice.
Yeah.
Sometimes they don't understand our cultures.
No.
I'm not saying that if you're in trouble, you should not contact them. I can't say that.
Yeah.
But what I do know is that we actually need a team of people within the Black community who understand and who can deal with these issues effectively. Because right now, the normal system is letting us down. Yeah. So I think what I would say is, first of all, we need to know that anybody is capable of committing child or sexual abuse. Do not believe that because you trust your best friend or your brother or your sister or your uncle or your aunt. Yeah. Even there are times that perpetrators are grandmothers. Yeah. Do not feel that this is something that is beyond anyone. Most abusers are males, but they're females sometimes. Yeah. So really, when you come on to the term in terms of, I agree with Donna when she spoke about having workshops, which is something that I myself is working on. I'm working on workshops for Black women and Black men, for our Black community, so that we can come together and deal with and discuss these trauma issues, because I think it is very important for us to do that. 9 out of 10 of our children know or is related to their abuser. Yeah, it is rampant in basically what has happened is, with a lot of people have been silenced. Now, these people are growing up, they're having children, they're getting triggered by experiences that has happened. They want to protect their children too. So what do? We actually come together as a community, similar to what Donna is saying. But I'm also going to tell you about some changes in behavior that happens with a child when they're being abused. Bedwetting. If they're all of a sudden wetting their bed and they hadn't, they start avoiding the abuser. As I said before, they don't want to go there. They cry when you take them there. They start with sexually inappropriate behavior. That could be even looking at porn. It could be the way they touch someone else. Physical problems such as STD or pregnancy. Problems in school. Sometimes these children give clues. So as parents, we need to listen. They may not say straight out, this person is abusing me, but they may say, I don't like this person. Or, I had a dream about this person and they did this. Listen intently as parents. Yeah. And please do not forget, this is not just a male thing. It's a female thing as well.
Look, guys, it's been a fascinating hour, and what I'm going to do is just quickly. I'm on the verge of disconnecting us from YouTube, and for those who have been on the Zoom before, you know that the talk takes a different level when we disconnect from YouTube. I have to say a quick thank you to 2 people who contacted me this morning and said to me, Paul, I know you know better, but don't call no name. Yeah. And one of them is my Sunday competitor and friend, Eddie Nestor, who called me early in the morning. Yeah, hi, Eddie, I know you're watching. And the other one is Dawn Martin. Dawn is always on the cause as well. So I'm very grateful for you guys having my back on this. I did feel it was an important topic and it was something that we needed to talk about. And the talk will continue, Nicola.
Paul, before you go, you see, enough love, Eddie. You know that I follow you and you know, we have our little conversations and Dawn. But you see them attitude? It's why we're in the mess we're in.
Yeah, it's not that. It's because I'm broke. It's because I'm broke and they know I can't afford another legal case.
In two lime of just tickets, you know, the man's a millionaire sitting down there. We're all eating beans and white rice and he's sitting down eating the whole steak. No, but what I'm saying is, Donna, put your book down, yeah? At the end of the day, yeah, we have to stop being fearful. And that is what it is. As a Black community, we have gone through copious amounts of trauma. And you see, a regular counsellor isn't going, it just scratched the surface. It's all about traumatic. A lot of these people have been through traumatic experiences, but we cannot live in fear. You think if a Jew man violate a next Jew man, the Jew community ain't gonna go and go down that road? You think a next Jew gonna tell a Jew, don't go and pull up the Jew man? Heck to the no. So this what we gotta stop doing. I understand it, because the person whose names that people don't wanna call is infamous, but for what? For all the things that nobody wants in their society. So everybody, you understand what I'm saying to you? Over 20,000 white people took pen to paper and start writings for a dance act on Britain's Got Talent. There is far more in a dance. If you put a dance on, I guarantee you'll get over 20,000 Black people in a one thing there. Why can't we all get together as a community and say exactly what a lot of organizations say and actually mean? Enough's enough.
Let me tell you why. Yeah. And I had a long think about this. And this is my stance. I'm objective driven.
Yeah.
So I need to understand what is my objective.
Right.
So where I stand is this. Is my objective to out him? No. My objective is to shut down his activities and to get some sort of assistance for the survivors. Yeah. So whatever needs to happen to bring him to justice, if I feel that saying his name would bring him to justice, I would, but I don't. Yeah. I don't think so. One of the things I've always felt about what we do in the Black community is we gas a lot. We don't think. Yeah. We are emotion level. We are emotion driven. Yeah. We are emotional people, and we don't apologize for that. I don't apologize for that, because we are emotional people. But it is not emotions that gets results. Yeah. What gets results is that we work quietly and deliberately to collect substantial evidence against these people, and you only break cover when you have this much that you're presenting to the police. Yeah? And I know we have a toxic relationship with the police, I get that. But we already know that the man them not jail him. Yeah? The man them not doing anything. So we have to use the forces who have the authority and the power to do what we need to do. And what we need to do is get people like him prosecuted and charged. We need to get people like him held up as an example of what will happen if you mess with a pit of them, boy or girl. That's what we need to do. Guys, just give me a second. I just want to wrap up and shut down from YouTube. If you're on YouTube, you're welcome to join us. I got to tell you, there's almost no space left in the Zoom. Yeah, we're running at 93 people, and the Zoom can only hold 100. So anybody who drop out, you might not be able to come back in. But I'm going to post the Zoom thing. Thank you guys so much for this discussion. Yep. I really, really needed this discussion to happen. And I'm hoping that somebody feels empowered. Psalm counseling is one for us, by us. These are people who, I know, Shireen hasn't talked about it, but a lot of her research when she was doing her degree was around the differences between Black people and white people and what we need as a community. Yeah. And so I know that very much the systems of the old were not in place for us, but that is changing. Ladies and gents, this is Paul Lawrence on People Talk. I'm just dropping from YouTube. Don't go away if you're on YouTube. Sorry, if you're on the Zoom. If you're in YouTube or on Facebook, look out for the Zoom thing. There's only 4 spaces left, so you better hurry. Thank you so much.